This happened when I was 15. I'm 27 for a little context on how long it's kind of lingered in my mind as a really strange close call. I've been kidnapped before, and I've had some really weird things happen, but this incident just struck me as strange and always had me wondering. I got into a fight with a friend of mine, ended up leaving the car and going into Walmart. I had been talking to two guys that were friends on MySpace, and I hit them up. Note that these guys are obvious creeps, being in their 20s and talking to some sophomore in high school. My stupid self had no red flags come up. I asked these dudes to pick me up and chill, and they say they're on the way. I had never met either of them before. The car pulls up, and I see there is no one in the front seat. Okay, just the one guy, I guess. Hop in the front seat. Immediately startled because the main guy I was talking with was, in fact, there, just in the seat behind me. I got a weird vibe, but I got out of the car and jumped into his seat as he scooted over to the middle. Seems strange, but I just figured he wanted me to sit back there with him. We agreed to go to a girlfriend of mine's house to smoke. I grew up in Las Vegas, and there is a huge freeway that runs through the desert and makes a giant loop around the city called the 215. We take that. As we are driving, I try to chat. A lot of silence, especially from the guy driving. Can't recall him saying anything. Then the driver turns on opera music. He turns it up full blast, just sitting there in complete silence. It was painfully loud and drowned out any talking. I was pretty weirded out, but we made it to my friend's house after a long drive and kind of tried to put it to the back of my mind. As we sat with her and her boyfriend taking rips, I became more and more paranoid. The guys were still quiet and weird, and I don't remember most of the awkward conversation they made, as little as there was. It was mostly me, her, and her boyfriend talking. As we left, I got a strange feeling I might die that night. I looked at my friend, and I was so out of it, I was trying to give her hints that I was scared. I said, "Okay, well, if I never see you again, I love you." She laughs and says, "Of course I'll see you again." I panic a little and text my dad nothing but their license plate number. When I read it the next day, his text just said, "I don't know what this means." We're driving on this new desert freeway around the city, and I'm in the back seat. I'm really high beyond belief, and the guy next to me in the middle seat is just staring at me. I can't bring myself to look at him and just sit there, trying to convince myself to stop being weird. I'm thinking, "You're high. Just do it. Just kiss the guy." I began to, and the friend starts blaring this freaking opera music again. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm making out with this guy in his 20s. We're about 15 miles from where I was saying to drop me off. All of a sudden, on this lonely desert highway, we pull off on a lonely desert road. I immediately begin to flip out. I start screaming and yelling and pushing the guy off of me and asking where he thinks he's going. He just responds, "Oh, wrong exit," and they begin to try to calm me down. Wrong exit? There's nothing for miles in any direction. The opera music continues to blare. They eventually drop me off at the same Walmart in the middle of the night. I call my mom and am picked up and grounded. Didn't really care. They were bartenders, and as long as you're in the door by 1 in the morning, no one knows the difference. I began to convince myself that I was just high and it wasn't really a big deal. These guys were just weird, and I was just really paranoid. So they eventually hit me up on MySpace again, and I hang out with them. Me and my friend Sarah meet them at a park. She was 17 and had a car, so she drove. I wanted to smoke, and they had some, but she declined. Both her parents were cops, and she wouldn't smoke and drive. I take a hit, and I think they were either counting on me being alone or her doing the same, because I was definitely drugged, and I'm very well versed in basically anything you can think of now, although I will say I'm about 5 years clean of anything hard. I just have a drink or two after work these days. But immediately I felt strange, incredibly strange. I was drooling and having some serious trouble speaking or walking. Sarah got me out of the car and began to try to walk me to hers down a short street. I was walking like my legs were stuck in mud. I kept laying on the sidewalk, and when I would close my eyes, I was seeing patterns of tiny ponies in red and blue. She kept having to get me up and try to walk me to the car. My guess is what should have taken a minute or two lasted for at least a half hour. I was completely incapacitated. We eventually made it to her car. We met a large group of friends at a gas station, but I still couldn't move really. I was looking at myself in the passenger mirror and people were gathering around and giggling. "What's wrong with Katie?" someone asked. We eventually ended up at a friend's apartment where my close friend Taylor sat with me while I laid on the carpet. I still couldn't really talk or move, but he kept saying I drank and smoked just like him to people as I laid there, completely terrified. I took one hit off that thing. What really messes me up is I told the entire thing to my brother, who is really active on sites like Tumblr and Reddit and all those kind of social media sites, and years later he said this to me. "You remember that story you told me about the guys with the opera music? I was reading online and I read an almost identical story. These guys are doing the same thing, blaring opera music and trying to drive her into the middle of nowhere. They begin to have their way with her and she ends up kicking one of them in the nose and breaking it. She just took off running into the night." It gave me chills, the similarities, man. Several years later, I met my husband online. My brother came with me to pick him up from the airport because he was in a nasty breakup and didn't want to be alone. I made him sit in the back because I wanted my future husband to have the front seat. My husband later said something that will always stick with me. He said if you have a strange person in the car, you have them sit next to the driver and someone sit in the seat behind them, so they're easy to attack and subdue if needed. Exactly like those two men did with me. They might not have counted on me getting into the back seat instead. And it also means they planned out one sitting in back, unless they were just incredibly weird. They stopped somewhere and he got out of the passenger seat and sat in the back for a reason. I always wondered if I was face to face with a couple of budding serial killers or something. They kept at it, but my dumb luck kept messing it up. Getting in the back seat, flipping out, designated drivers, etc. Maybe if they had been a little more confident in the beginning, I wouldn't be able to type any of this. Now I know MySpace doesn't exist anymore, but I know that there's a lot more social media out there, so please, do be careful. So this story starts in 2006, back when MySpace was very popular. My little sister, Baby, was very active on the site, remaking her profile, adding and chatting with random people daily. She started telling her friends she has a boyfriend named Marcus in Atlanta, and when his family comes to visit other family members, they would meet up. We lived in a small suburb outside of Chicago called Sauk Village. I scolded her about telling random people where we live and how dangerous it was. She stated she only told him what town. It's not like he could immediately find her. They continued speaking via MySpace and eventually texted into 2007, when Marcus informed her he and his family would be in Chicago and that they should definitely meet up to hang. She agreed, but never spoke a word about it to anyone. The Friday spring break was set to start. I made it in the house after school and started my chores. It was weird because Baby would usually get home at that same time as me, as high school let out at 2:45 and she got out at 3:15. By 5 p.m. I noticed that she still had not come home. I went searching for her, leaving the back door unlocked just in case she popped up while I was gone. I went to her friend's house who stayed 2 blocks away, and they said the last time we saw Baby was when school let out and we were walking down the trail. I checked with other friends and they all confirmed that they had not seen her. While walking home, I noticed a black Nissan Altima with Georgia tags driving very slowly around my block. I got that weird feeling like static running from my ears to my feet, so I jumped the back gate and ran into my back door. I continued calling Baby's phone and family members, and then I heard the computer ping. I noticed Baby was still logged into MySpace, so I read her messages, thinking maybe there would be a clue there. The first few messages were her friends telling her I was looking for her, and she needed to get home before she got in trouble, but the fourth down was Marcus. The message read, "Baby, I'm on your block. I just saw you jump that fence. Why are you hiding from me?" I was shook. What did he mean he saw her jump a fence? So I read through their thread, and to my horror, I realized that she had sent him pictures with the both of us in it, and never clarified which one she was. Our mother didn't allow her to post pictures of herself on her profile, so it was very easy to assume she was whichever one you wanted her to be. While I was reading through the thread, I hear a car door slam and two male voices approaching my door, and then I hear beating on my window. I go to my window since it's light taps, and I can hear baby's voice urging me to open the window. I open the window and she slides in and turns off the light, pulling my hand into the closet with her. She said Marcus is not 13 like he said. He is old, like in his 30s. He saw me and asked where my sister was, so I've been avoiding the house. I scolded her and said she should have come home first. The banging on the door grew more intense. Then I heard more footsteps on the back patio. I panicked because I couldn't remember if I locked the door or not. Just then my question was answered. I heard heavy footsteps coming down the stairs into that place that we were in. I took out my phone and I called 911. I whispered my address and asked for police. I heard a voice say, "Baby, where are you?" with a sinister laugh to follow. A crack of light shone through the closet, which meant he was in my room. Tears started streaming down baby's face. Then the person in the car started beeping the horn crazy. He ran out of the house and I heard tires peel off. Too scared to move, I put the phone back to my ear and the operator said the police are outside. I refused to move, actually. My legs refused to move. They felt paralyzed. The police came downstairs and said, "Ladies, it's okay to come out." And now the house is all clear. We ran out and jumped on the officers out of relief. We printed out all the messages and gave the login info to the investigators. The person left fingerprints on the door and wall, so they had fingerprints. We didn't hear too much after. Fast forward to 2018, I'm on Facebook and I posted a transformation picture of baby and I in a group. Then I went to work. When I got off, I had a message from someone named Marcus saying, "You got away once, but I will get you next time." I immediately put a request in to delete my profile. This happened to me when I was 11, or if you will, in 2005. In what was a usual summer day for me, I got up at about noon, went on a bike ride with my brother, then came home and spent most of the remaining daylight in our above-ground pool. We were well off, but by no means rich. So as I was relaxing for the night and intent on spending the rest of the night playing video games, I decided to check my MySpace profile really quick and spend some of the energy on my games there. As I finish off my Dog Wars energy bar, I'm fit to close out the browser and head back downstairs to play some PlayStation when I get a friend request. Allie, 13, 3 hours away from nowhere, Kentucky. I clicked the name because I didn't know an Allie, not even an Allison, or really any girls who had A names at all. She was pretty, and 11-year-old me just scoffed like, why would she want to be friends with me? I almost ignored it. Almost. I accepted the request, and with not much else to do, I sent her a message, asking a simple question like, should I know you from somewhere? She tells me we've not met, but she's friends with one of my friends, Mike. I check out her profile. See, she and Mike share a lot of common interests, are on each other's friends list, so it checks out. I don't message Mike to ask him about her, but I was a very trusting young boy and had no reason to believe she was anything but what she said she was. For the next few weeks, I'd talk to her every night, for less than 3 hours usually. We'd just chat about things, school, music, television, typical kid things. I didn't really think anything about it more than just being MySpace friends, until she said that she liked me. I sort of laughed it off, thinking she just meant like in the way of friends like each other. However, she clarified that she meant she had feelings for me and wanted to meet in real life. She lived pretty far away from me, so I didn't really see how this would be possible. I knew my parents were not about to take me to some girl I'd met online's house. I wouldn't want them to in the first place. They were decent parents and all, and I just never felt like I could talk to them about these kinds of things, so I just sort of shrugged it off. I told her it'd be hard for us to meet because, as much as I like riding my bike, a 3-hour bike ride to a part of the state I'd hardly ever seen before was not something I'd be comfortable doing. She was very understanding and said that she at least wanted to talk on the phone instead of just messages. I agreed, but told her never to call my number and to always let me be the one to call her because I didn't want my parents picking up and asking questions. She understood, and I called her. The first time I got her dad, and he gave me a gruff, "Who is this?" It was weird because I had the phone with me at the computer, and I told her I was calling, and she said she had the phone with her as well. However, I didn't think anything of it at all. I told him it was James and that I was looking for Allie. He told me to hold on a second, and there was a rustling sound on the phone, like someone trying to make it sound like they were handing it over to someone. Again, I didn't really think anything of it, and when I heard a high-pitched hello, I didn't really think anything more of it. We talked for a few minutes, and she said she had to go because her dad was expecting a call as well. I shrugged it off and told her to just message me and we could talk again later. We kept messaging back and forth, and before I knew it, it was almost the end of the summer, and she was not satisfied having not met me in person yet, so she posed an idea. She said there was an end-of-summer event going on at a lake near my house. She said she and her family used to go there sometimes and that she could probably talk them into going there for the event. My family usually went to the area on 4th of July and stuff, and having just had a nice time there in July, it wasn't too hard for me to convince my folks as well. A few nights later, she lets me know that they had agreed, and that she was super excited to finally meet me. She told me she was going to kiss me as soon as she saw me, and I just sort of blushed and tried my best to make it sound like it wasn't a big deal, like I was some stud who kissed plenty of girls before, but I wasn't. I was totally pumped to finally kiss a girl, and it was only a few nights away. I had a hard time sleeping the next couple of nights. I had stayed up most of the night talking to Allie. We were both excited and couldn't wait to meet. It was very much a magical experience. The night before, I think I stayed up till 8 a.m. talking to her. So the day had come, and after an early afternoon bike ride and a short swim, our family loaded into the car, and my dad took the truck so that me and my brother could take our bikes to the lake with us. There was plenty of bike trails, and we always enjoyed riding there. I told my brother I wasn't going to be hanging with him the whole night, however, and would only ride with him a little bit before I went to meet another friend. He wanted to tag along, like little brothers often do, but I quickly convinced him he didn't want to hang out with me because the kids were mean, and I was only hanging out with him because of one of them. He didn't ask questions after that. About an hour later, the sun started to set, and my brother said that he was going back to meet with our parents anyway. He didn't like riding in the dark. He had a habit of crashing as it was, so when I ventured off on my own, it was without hindrance. I made my way to the picnic area Allie and I had agreed to meet at, and I sat on one of the picnic tables, my bike resting against the slide. I sat for a long time, so long that I started to get worried and was ready to leave because the fireworks were about to start and Allie hadn't shown up yet. I stood up and jumped down from the picnic table, and just as I did, a rusty old white pickup truck pulled up beside the tables. The man inside reached across the cab to roll down the window and gave me a weird smile, telling me that he was Allie's dad and he was going to take me to her. I started feeling strange about the situation, so I just gave him a blank stare and said, "What?" He turned the engine off, thinking maybe I couldn't hear him over the sound of it, and climbed out of the truck. "I said I'm here to take you to Allie. Hop on in," he said, opening the passenger door and motioning for me to climb in. The truck was full of garbage, and it looked very dirty, and I could smell oil and other things coming from the truck. I gave a crooked look and told him I wasn't going to get in. As he grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the truck, I realized pretty quickly what he was all about. "Get in the truck!" he barked, squeezing my arm so tightly that I thought it was broken. I pulled away, practically giving myself an Indian burn as I told him I was leaving. They came after me, so I did the only thing I think I could do to repel a grown man twice my size and probably thrice my age. I reared back and kicked him square in the genitals. I didn't bother to wait to see how he handled the blow. I hopped on my bike and pedaled with all my might back to the other side of the lake where my family was. He didn't follow me. At least I don't think he did. If he did, he might have seen my dad, who was a rather large guy, and definitely not someone you'd want to fight with after he'd had a few beers. I never saw him again, and when I got home and went to message Allie to tell her what a jerk her dad was, the profile was gone. I saw Mike just before school started, and he said he had no idea who Allie was and didn't even remember adding her on MySpace.
It wasn't until some years later I realized how terribly close I'd come to being abducted, and God knows what that man wanted to do to me. This is a bit of a throwback, 2006 to be exact. This is about my encounter with a guy I met online named Jared. I have no idea how he came across my profile on MySpace because we had no friends in common, but he messaged me wanting to know about me. I saw that he lived only about 45 minutes north of me, and I remember thinking he was very attractive. Saw that we had a lot of the same interests, and I found his statuses hilarious. Even though adding people I didn't know on MySpace was completely out of character for me, I'm introverted, private, and don't really like meeting new people, I decided to add him anyway. We started messaging each other a lot, and he really piqued my curiosity because he was so different from all the guys I had grown up with. His humor was a bit odd, and I still found him to be really hilarious. I remember using a friend's computer to talk to him one night, and she walked up behind me and said, "Who is that?" I told her I didn't know, but I liked him. She then says, "Ask him out." I thought, sure, why not? He only lives 45 minutes away, and he seems really cool. We exchanged phone numbers and set a date for dinner that weekend. Jared told me to meet him at the grocery store near his house, and I could just follow him to his apartment in my car. I thought that idea sounded great. I pulled up, and I only had to wait about 10 minutes or so until he got there. He pulled up right next to me, and I was immediately thrown off because, even though it was dark out at this point, I could still tell right away that he wasn't nearly as attractive as the profile pictures would present. I decided I wasn't going to be so shallow and proceeded to follow him to his place. And here's where it starts to get really weird. As we are driving down a two-way road, there is a succession of entrances to different apartment complexes, spaced about 15 feet in front of one another. Jared keeps turning on his blinker, turning in, and swiftly turning back out, like he's trying to psych me out. I'll admit that the first time it was pretty funny. I thought, haha, you got me. However, that initial feeling quickly fades as he does this for nearly every single entrance on the way to his place, maybe 9 or 10 times. Now I'm thinking, what is he doing? I actually became insulted and thought he was trying to lose me at this point. I kept on having to brake, cars are starting to build up behind me, and it's making the drive take forever because I keep having to slow down for this nonsense. Had I not been a naive 17-year-old, I would have followed my F this instinct and turned around and drove all the way back home. But no, of course not. I chalked all this up to his weird sense of humor and tried to give him a chance. We finally get to his apartment. We have a normal introduction and I walk into his place. It's a typical bachelor pad, I tell myself, as I see the back of his entrance door is entirely covered in naked chicks. Think a collage of the filthiest smut hung up to cover every inch of this 7-foot-tall door. Okay, whatever. He's a single guy, I'm thinking. Maybe not the classiest guy, but a guy nonetheless. Anyway, we get to talking and he's kinda quiet. But for the most part, he's awkward and doesn't even know what to say. It's at this point that I notice he's wearing a really raggedy white t-shirt. Weird. It's been about 15 or 20 minutes since we have been at his place, just hanging out in his kitchen, and he begins to ask me personal questions. I start taunting him about his awkwardness a bit to A, lighten the mood, and B, get him to change the subject. For example, he asked, "How many guys have you slept with?" And I retort, "Wow, very nice question to ask a girl on a first date, Jared. How did you get this smooth?" He eats it up and thinks we're playing a game. This goes back and forth for about 10 minutes before I ask when we were going to dinner. He sort of snaps back into reality and says he has to change. Thank God he comes back out looking pretty sharp, and maybe this night will turn out all right. I could not have been any more wrong. We get into his car, which is a pretty decent Mustang, to go to some place he wants to take me for dinner. We're driving for about 15 minutes before he says he needs to make a detour to see a friend. Okay, I said. The friend walks up to the side of my door. They talk for a couple of minutes, and then the friend starts to get into the car. Jared looks at me and asks me to get into the back. At this point, this guy is really starting to get on my nerves. Could he be any more rude? I'm dying in the back seat thinking that this is just the worst. and I can't wait until he dumps this friend somewhere because I'm starving and he didn't drive all the way up here to hang out with two rude strangers. I have no clue why he picked this friend up. I have a hunch because of how quick the interaction was that he was buying drugs, but I couldn't see into the front seat or hear over the blaring music. As we are driving where I can only presume is back to the friend's place to drop him off, he starts driving very erratically, pulling some more absurdity like he was doing earlier, plus turning sharp corners like he's Dale Earnhardt. But really he's driving like Mr. McGill. I am being tossed all over the back seat and I see the friend is hanging on for dear life as well. Then, when I think it's all over, he starts to turn to go into the neighborhood, but he has to cross a lane of oncoming traffic. As he is making his way through the turn, he stops. I freak out. All I can see are headlights through the tiny backseat windows shining and coming right at us. Me and the friend in the front seat are just screaming nonsensically. I don't even remember what I said. I'm just screaming. As soon as we are almost rammed by a giant Cadillac that has to slam on their brakes so hard they fishtail, he peels out, completing the turn. I'm shocked. I didn't even say anything. I wait until he drops his now totally calm and collected friend off, and I tell him I'd like to go home. He drives me back in complete silence. When we get to his place, he hurries over to my side and lets me out, but he is standing so close that I have to squeeze past him. As I am trying to get out of his deathmobile, he places the hand he isn't holding the door open with on the other side of me, trapping me in between him and the car. I look at him and he is just staring at me, so I say, "I'm not kissing you." He responds, "Oh, come on, let's just go upstairs." I have to literally hold back a guffaw. I tell him, "Okay, Jared, that's enough for one night. I'm gonna go now, and I'll text you later, okay?" He is still staring intensely into my eyes, and I'm just praying he lets me leave. He starts to shift away, and at that moment, I think he is letting me go. He pushes his mouth onto mine so hard that I'm thrown into the side of the car. I barely struggle free and haul it to my car, quickly looking behind me, and see that he's just standing there. I start driving the long 45 minutes home in silence. I am so relieved that I get to go home to my nice warm bed. All of a sudden, I hear my phone. Ding, 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 ding. I hear about 20 messages coming in, and when I look at my phone, I feel sick. The text reads, "Hey, why did you leave? Please come back. I want to play more games with you." Is this a game? Do you want to play a game? Okay, I'll give you 15 minutes to get back here. I'm counting down. 1, 2, 3, 4. I miss you. Please come back. I don't like this game at all. He sent all of that within a period of 2 to 3 minutes, around 10 minutes after I left. All I can remember thinking is, what was that? How can someone be so awesome online and then end up just being a total weirdo? One last note. The next morning, the entire top right half of my mouth and a bit underneath my nose was swollen and bruised. Never again on MySpace. In grade 5, a friend of mine, Chloe, was messaged on MySpace by our mutual friend, Asha. Asha asked Chloe to meet at the park by Chloe's house. Chloe had baseball practice, so she told her, maybe another day. Asha insisted that today was best and she really wanted to hang out, even if it was for just 10 minutes. Chloe told her no again as she was about to go eat dinner, then leave. Chloe thought it was strange that Asha was so persistent, as they had never hung out outside of school, let alone afterwards. The next day, Chloe confronted Asha. "I'm sorry I couldn't hang out yesterday. I had baseball practice. I'm free tonight if you want." Asha was confused. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "On MySpace, you asked me to hang out last night." Asha then explained that she didn't message Chloe. Creepier yet, she had recently gotten a new account due to spam she was receiving. The scariest part to me is that Asha had referred to the park by its name, which isn't a very common one. A couple of years later, my friend saw a green van parked on the street that the park was on, with a middle-aged man inside that only showed up during soccer games, and when lots of kids were around and would leave when the kids left. My friend lived across the street from the park and noticed this from her window frequently. Chloe deleted MySpace when she got home. We're not sure if that van and the messenger that night was correlated or not. Back in the days when MySpace was on its way out and Facebook was rising to popularity, my family had a very strange encounter. I was in 9th grade at the time, young and quite naive about the dangers of the internet. Just another way of saying that I was friends with just about anyone on MySpace. I remember this guy's page to the letter. His name was Matt. His picture was a guy in an army dress, and he had light blonde hair, brown eyes, and was very pale. He looked to be about 20. In retrospect, what was a 20-year-old doing adding a 13-year-old on MySpace anyways? I thought nothing of it. We never messaged or commented back and forth. Other than adding him as a friend, we never had any other contact. Then, late one night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize with an area code that was very unfamiliar. The text message was just an innocuous, "Hey," and a smiley face. I asked who it was, and I'm told, "It's Matt from MySpace." I ask how he got my number, and I'm told, "You posted it." That was a lie. While I didn't know a lot about internet safety, that was something I knew better than to do. However, just to make sure I hadn't done something so stupid, I combed through all of my bulletins and blogs and found nothing even remotely like that. I never responded after that. Every now and then, I would get a text from him. Never anything too weird, just a, "Hey beautiful," or "You're so pretty," or "I really like your new profile picture." And because it seemed so trivial, I never mentioned it to anybody, not even my close friends or sister with whom I am very close. I just wouldn't respond. One day, he sent me a string of texts asking me a few pretty personal questions. I told him to delete my number and not contact me again. After that, I didn't hear from him for about 4 weeks. On that night, he sends me the usual, "Hey, what are you up to?" I go off on him. I tell him he's harassing me, that he's an adult and could get into some serious trouble for what he's doing, and he better drop it and leave me alone for good or I would call the cops. When he didn't respond, I thought I had finally gotten the message across, so I'm getting ready for bed. I had just put on my pajamas when my little sister, 4 years my junior, walks into my room and tells me she had been getting weird texts from this guy who claims I gave him her number. Obviously, it was the same dude. It's always been the running joke that I raised this particular sister, so she calls me her firstborn mother. When she tells me this, protective, maternal, if you will, instincts kick in, and I tell my parents everything and that we need to call the cops. When they get out to file the report, my sister and I have to tell them everything. We show them the old texts and the MySpace pages, and then they set to work. The cops call the police department in the same area code as the guy and report what's going on. They end up arresting some 25-year-old guy who wasn't in the army, whose name was not Matt, and who was involved in some sort of weird ring of people getting phone numbers and sending weird and mildly inappropriate texts to young girls on inappropriate communications, or something like that. This is something that obviously happened to me a long time ago, as MySpace is no longer relevant, but it still gives me chills from time to time. It's not as bad as some of the stories I've heard before, but it stuck with me. When I was in high school, I, just like everyone else, had a MySpace, and just like everyone else, I posted selfies. I never considered myself very popular online. I wasn't one of those people with hundreds of friends. My real name wasn't even on the thing, nor my actual hometown. Mostly I used it to see what my friends were up to, but I also used it as a personal photo album to share and post pictures of random things I've done. I went to the mall one night with a bunch of friends, which was a typical Friday outing. We would meet, maybe watch a movie, and more than likely spend time at the arcade playing DDR. A bunch of us were at Hot Topic, another common haunt for us teenagers. We were browsing their selection, thinking of what outfit would be best to defy our conservative parents when, out of the blue, he arrives. The guy was overweight, slightly taller than me, and obviously much older. He had the look of someone who had never matured past the age of 17, despite being in his mid to late 20s. Why else would he be approaching a 16-year-old in a Hot Topic on a Friday night? The first thing out of his mouth upon seeing me was, "Hey, I know you, Mooney." I stopped dead and stared at him, racking my memory. Mooney was a name that only my friends called me. It was a moniker that I had adopted in high school and was not associated in any way with my name. I thought for half a second that I had met this guy at some anime convention and for some reason he recognized me. Then he said without hesitation, "You're Mooney from MySpace." My eyes widened as my brain spun through responses, trying to come up with a proper way to interact with this creeper. "Oh, are we friends?" I asked him hesitantly. I definitely did not recognize him. I typically was very good about becoming acquainted with anyone I was friends with online. "No, I just have seen you. Around. You're from Washington, D.C., right?" he asked. I now knew this guy only knew me from online. I had set my location to Washington, D.C. because I was paranoid about posting my actual town, because I didn't want to be found by creepers like him. The conversation that followed was filled with awkward, idle chit-chat as I attempted to move closer and closer to the door of the hot topic, all the while trying to make sure that my friends were close to me. I attained no information on how this guy found me on MySpace, or why he spent a long enough time on MySpace to actually memorize what I look like. It's not as if though I had very distinguished features. I was the typical 16-year-old punk wannabe kid that wore Hot Topic skirts, Hello Kitty shirts, and sometimes hats with animal ears. Other than that, I was undistinguishable from any other teen on a busy Friday night. And like I mentioned before, I was not very popular on the website. I had barely 50 friends. I was far from internet famous or boxy tier recognition status. My photos were not profane, and I did not dress inappropriately in any way. Quite frankly, I was and still am pretty average in the looks department. After that, I set my MySpace to private and blocked most of the people I didn't know personally. It should have been a case of be careful of who you talk to online, but in this situation, I never even spoke to the guy. He literally found my profile online and became acquainted with just my photographs. This happened sometime back when MySpace was the biggest social network. YouTube was just coming on the scene and I had uploaded some silly videos that I posted on my MySpace profile. At the time, I was a young and slim guy. For those who don't remember the time before Facebook, mostly everyone added anyone who requested them. No one really considered privacy settings. I'm sure there was some who did, but for people my age at the time, we never really spoke of it. It was new and we were naive. Anyway, my profile was public. One day I received a friend request with a message. I accepted first, my first mistake, and then I clicked on their profile to see their pictures. But they didn't really have any, and the ones they did have were of landmarks. The only info I knew was that it was a male in his early 30s. I'm 17 at this time. Well, I clicked on the message and it read something like this. "Hi, I'm new to Houston. I'm not gay, but I have a diverse group of friends and I don't discriminate. You seem really interesting and I'd like to get to know you." And by the way, I am gay and maybe I'm being an a-hole, but I replied that I didn't believe him and that it was weird he was looking for gay friends if he himself was not gay. He replied in defense, and I don't really remember what he said because I knew enough not to give this man the time of day. I should have deleted him, but I didn't, and it wasn't really a problem because we never spoke on MySpace again. Months later, I was coming back from the mall by myself when my car began to overheat. I had a 95 Mazda Millennia that was always giving me problems. I was really far from home and I didn't want to stop. Eventually my car died in the middle of a busy road, so I was stuck there, clueless about what to do. Others were just passing me by. My family wasn't picking up calls and neither were any of my friends. I was freaking out, but after a few minutes I see a utility truck slowing down and a man step out. He offers help and calls me Mr. MySpace. I'm thinking that he tried to make a joke because I'm young and therefore must spend my time on MySpace. He has some gray hair and looks old. I kind of get a bad vibe at this point, but no one else is stopping. Then things get really weird. He says, "You don't remember me, do you?" I say, "No. We're friends on MySpace. You have all those videos on your page. I saw them. I sent you a message about being new and wanting to be friends." At first I didn't remember, but then I thought back and realized it had to be the same guy who sent me the messages with his friend request. I'm getting creeped out at this point. All I can do is say, "Oh?" and smile anxiously. He keeps saying over and over, "I can't believe this is how we meet." He's much bigger than me and could easily take me. He puts his hand on my shoulder and then my back. I don't know what to do. We're looking at my car. I'm trying to keep the conversation about my car, and he's staring at me and says, "You're so cute. We need to go out dancing." I laugh nervously. I don't want to be rude because he's the only one that has stopped to help. Again, he says, "I can't believe this is how we meet." I laugh nervously again. We push the car to the parking lot of the supermarket on the other side of the street. Once we get to the lot, he asks me again if I want to go dancing. His hands are on my shoulder, and I want to run when another car with a young couple pulls into the lot and asks if we need help. He gets ready to answer no for me, but I say yes. They get out, and the man and the creeper look at my car. It's decided that I should leave my car there and then come back for it later with a tow truck and have my dad look at it when he can. The man from MySpace tells the couple thanks, and he's sort of implying he's going to take me home. I'm starting to get scared because I don't want this man to know where I live. I don't know what to do. I know now that I shouldn't have worried about offending the offender, but I was young then. Thankfully, the couple still asks if I need a ride to my house, and I immediately say yes. The man looks surprised as if he thought I should have gone with him. I get in the car with the couple. They tell me that they stopped because they could tell I was uncomfortable. I was so happy that the man never found out where I lived, and that the couple was nice enough to stop and help even when they saw someone else had stopped already and had helped me push my car into the lot. I deleted anyone I didn't know personally from MySpace and set my profile to private from then on. Lesson learned. One night I was running on the treadmill in the garage when some guy was walking up my driveway. Now, it would be weird enough to see him in the cul-de-sac, let alone my driveway. I get off, close the garage door, and don't think anything of it. I was walking to my car to go to school the next morning. My window was broken in, and I realized, no, I left my purse in the car. So I filed a report and all that jazz and go to school. I assumed it was that guy and told my parents and everyone, but we didn't know who he was, so there wasn't much we could do. This was back in the day of MySpace. I randomly get a message from a creepy-looking guy who looks similar to the guy from the night my car got broken into. He said that he found my cards on the side of the road and that he wanted to return them. I said, awesome. If my purse happened to show up too, that would be great and no questions asked. He asked where he should send it to, and I said the address on my driver's license that he had. So a week goes by and I'm not thinking anything of it. I get a friend request and a message from him. He said, and I kid you not, I wish I could fit in that envelope, as well as how I am beautiful and junk. I accepted his friend request because his profile was private and I was a stupid 16-year-old girl. I clicked on his photos and he has pictures he drew of a gutted, naked woman. I show my dad and he kind of blows me off. The next day, he sends me a message that says, I think we will cross paths really soon. I freak out. I tell my dad that I think he is going to come to the house because he had my driver's license and obviously knew where I lived, even if it was a different guy than the person I saw in my driveway. My dad and mom say, stop worrying, it is no big deal. I just tell them, well, if I go missing, it is. My card showed up eventually, and thank God, I never heard from him again.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.